Go ahead.
This is Frankie Edgar, UFC fighter. Welcome to the Trevor Airdrie Show.
Welcome everybody to episode 9 of the Trevor Airdrie Show. I am your host, Trevor Airdrie. This is a special Thursday edition due to Bellator 96 being on last night. I'm usually seen every Wednesday on MMAJam.ca. And without anything further, on to the show. The recap, sponsored by Combination Sports, your one-stop shop for MMA boxing gear and apparel, located at 306 King Street West in Kitchener, Ontario. If you can't go to Kitchener, no worries. You can shop online at www.combosports.com. Alright, this past weekend we had UFC 161 coming from Winnipeg, Canada. We had a main event of two legends of the sport, Dan Henderson, Rashad Evans. It was a very big back and forth tilt with both men landing some significant strikes. Dan Henderson just couldn't land that H-bomb at the end of the night. So we had Rashad Evans squeaking out a 29-28, 29-28, 28-29 split decision. In the co-main event of the night, we had Stipe Miocic versus Roy Nelson in a fight that nobody in their right mind projected the winner to be Stipe Miocic. And I couldn't say enough, he's a great ambassador of the sport. He's a great guy in general, but I couldn't see him getting past the knockout power of Roy Nelson. That being said, if Roy Nelson goes deep into a fight, the fight tends to go the other way. So Stipe Miocic had a great game plan all night. He landed the strikes that he needed to land, and he kept Roy Nelson's power out of distance. Those are the keys to victory there. And at the end of the day, he wins that fight via unanimous decision, 30-27 three ways. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Roy Nelson, that will be his last fight in the UFC, because I have a feeling that now that he's out of contract, Dana White hates dealing with him. He'll be jumping over to the Bellator flagship pretty soon. Before that, we had Canadian Ryan Jimmo versus Igor Pakrajic. Jimmo used a very smart game plan. It was a very lackluster fight in my mind. Definitely wasn't his 7-second knockout he had a while back. And he wins that one via unanimous decision. Before that, we had women's MMA making its return to the UFC with Alexis Davis versus Rosie Sexton. This was incredible. Two great athletes just going toe-to-toe. Nobody gave Sexton a chance. Everybody was saying Alexis Davis was going to win. Alexis Davis does take the win via unanimous decision. I was a little surprised to see this go the distance. I thought it was going to be a submission victory for Alexis Davis, but all in all, Alexis Davis is moving up in the UFC ranks. And starting out the night on the main card, we had Sean Jordan defeating Pat Barry via TKO, 59 seconds of the first round. Barry just got caught. That was the end of it, and Sean Jordan just took advantage of it, finished the fight, and puts himself in the win column in the UFC. Now I'll go through the undercard really quickly. We had Jake Shields defeat Tyron Woodley by split decision. We had James Krause upset Sam Stout via guillotine choke, 4:47 in the third round. We had Sean Pearson defeating Kenny Robertson by majority decision. We had Roland Delorme defeat Edwin Figueroa via unanimous decision. Facebook fights, Mitch Clark defeating John McGuire by unanimous decision, and Yves Jabouin defeating Dustin Pag by split decision. And the word of the day, obviously enough, is decision, because there was so many of them on the UFC this weekend. You only had 2 fights actually finish, not in the judges' scorecards. So I give credit to the cardio that the UFC fighters put in this weekend, but gotta, get a little bit more finishing fights going on, like Bellator was last night, but I'll touch that later in the show. So following the fight, we had the fight of the night going out to Sam Stout versus James Krause. We had knockout of the night going to Sean Jordan. And we had submission of the night, James Krause. So James Krause and Sean Jordan, They get the gimmies because they're the only ones that had a knockout and a submission on the night. And then James Krause once again, so $50K to each of those. Krause obviously takes home $100K, and that's that. In the post-fight, Dana White announced that Roy Nelson set the UFC record for heavyweight for most strikes absorbed without being knocked out following his UFC 161 loss. The UFC record was broken when he took the 437th significant strike without being knocked out. That's a crazy, crazy stat. And congratulations to Roy Nelson for doing it in, most likely, like I said earlier in the show, in his last UFC fight. So in the news this week, sponsored by Street Soldier, sweet swag at sweet prices. You can go to www.strtsoldier.com to get yours today. So in the news this week, we had Fabricio Verdum call out Cain Velasquez. We know Cain Velasquez is fighting Junior Dos Santos for the third time, but he called him out as a Brazil versus Mexico, the Ultimate Fighter, which is very intriguing to me. I think it's a more intriguing fight than Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, as I think Velasquez just has Dos Santos' number at this point, and it's going to end the same way as the second fight did. Also this week, big news for Canada. It's a very heavily Canadian-based news this week. We have the Ultimate Fighter Canada versus Australia announced. The coaches will be Patrick Cote for Canada, Kyle Noak for Australia, and they will be coaching welterweights. So all you Canadian welterweights, get your medicals together and file your application for Tough Canada versus the Australians. So definitely check that out. Also this week, we have Anthony Showtime Pettis pulling out of his fight versus Jose Aldo. Once again, Pettis, every single time this guy gets so close, either an injury or the loss to Clay Guida or something happens to Anthony Pettis that withdraws him from the fight. And then he goes and runs his mouth and says that he wants to take TJ Grant's place against Benson Henderson because he deserves it more, which, you know, you can't really argue that fact based on TJ Grant's latest winning streak. But I guess Anthony Pettis does have wins over more prominent opponents, with the exception of TJ Grant's win over Gray Maynard. But Dana White said no, and then it turns out today was announced that Anthony Showtime Pettis is going to be out for at least 6 weeks, meaning he can't even take that fight against Benson Henderson. So it was all just, you know, water under the bridge, really. The Korean Zombie will step into that spot, and that makes a very intriguing fight. The Korean Zombie, for the people that don't recognize that name, he knocked out Mark Hominick in 7 seconds. He's been on a tear, and this guy is incredible. He's very hard to finish. He has a granite chin. He's kind of like the Roy Nelson of the featherweight division, and he always looks like he just got pummeled by the end of the fight, but somehow, some way, squeaks out the victory, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. So, also this weekend, we have Dana White versus Steve Mazzagatti in a war of words that Mazzagatti hasn't even addressed yet. It all stems from an event that wasn't even a UFC event this weekend. It was from the WSOF, the World Series of Fighting 3, where John Fitch and Josh Berkman met in the main event. What happened here is Josh Berkman took down John Fitch. He had him in a guillotine choke. He took him down with like a left hand, and then he had him in a guillotine choke. And he had to reverse the guillotine choke, like flip John Fitch physically over and let go of the choke before the referee even called the fight. It was almost like Mazzagatti was just staring at the fight, just watching it as a fan. And if you watch the side replay of that fight, you can actually see John Fitch tap before he gets choked unconscious. So I agree with Dana White in this statement, and it turns out that Steve Mazzagatti should be reffing the Anderson Silva-Chris Weidman fight next month in Vegas, the main event on July 6th. So it'll be very interesting to see if there's an exchange of words there. Perhaps Steve Mazzagatti should maybe hire some security for the night. Also this week, We have UFC 165 coming to you from Toronto, Ontario. It goes on September 21st. And the main event announced Alexander Gustafsson versus John Jones for the UFC light heavyweight champion of the world. Also on that card, the only other fight that's been announced so far is Mike Reese versus Miles Jury. So two great fights there, and Toronto fans should be very excited to see John Jones again, I guess, because he fought last year in September in Toronto. As well, Hector Lombard announced that he plans to drop down to 170. He hasn't had a lot of luck at the 185 weight class in the UFC. I think it's a good move for him, and he's targeting Nate Marquardt as his first fight. So, once again, two, up and down guys in the UFC. They've gone from 185, and now Hector Lombard wants to go down to 170. Hector Lombard was very impressive in Bellator. He walked into the UFC with a 25 winning streak, and then he gets beat by Tim Bosch, and I believe he's 1-1 in the UFC. And then also this week, like I said, it was a big week in news. George St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks will take place in November 16th to be exact, in Las Vegas. It'll be the UFC's 20th anniversary show, and they couldn't get New York because New York still hasn't voted on whether the mixed martial arts is legal there or unlegal, or illegal, sorry. And we have, New York is the only state in the whole United States that doesn't have legalized mixed martial arts yet. So it's only a matter of time, but Dana White and the UFC brass, the Fertitta brothers, they won't get their wish of doing the 20th anniversary show in New York, which is very sad news. Coming up next, Outside the Cage. Sponsored by M&A Sports Media. Big news is always on the go. Go to www.mnasportsmedia.com. Go there, you can pick up your Support Local MMA wristbands. I'm wearing it. Bobblehead Bass Rutin's wearing it. And you can also check out all the upcoming events. So, coming up, we have the Johnny Hendricks meet and greet at Fight Planet. It goes on June 22nd from 11 a.m. till 1 p.m. Tickets are $20. It's at 730 Upper James Street in Hamilton, Ontario. Go out, get an autograph from what could be the new UFC welterweight champion come November. As well, coming up in August, we have the second annual Sean Tompkins Memorial Golf Tournament. It's held at Fire Rock Golf Club in Kamoka, Ontario. Proceeds go to benefit the Sean Tompkins Memorial Fund, as well as the St. Leonard's Society of London. Registration, you can register at Adrenaline Training Center, or you can register online at the Fire Rock Golf Club website. And it's going to be a great day of fun and excitement. There's going to be some UFC personalities there. There's going to be stuff to be raffled off. It's just a great day of fun. So come out, hit the links, get some food, and just enjoy the day. So this week on Trevor's Corner, sponsored by Fear the Fighter Training Academy. Want to be the best, train with the best? Come down to 512 Charles Street East in Kitchener, Ontario, and sign up with Chad and Kyle today. They just had big news out of that camp with Aaron Goku Rotundo winning silver of the FILA Amateur MMA Championships of the world. So that's incredible news, finishing second. And Canada in general actually won the tournament for amateur MMA. So Aaron gets silver at 145, which is just great news for them. So definitely go check that out. You can train with Aaron, Kyle, Devin, a bunch of great guys down there. So if you want any more information on that, you can go to www.fearthefightertrainingacademy.com. So the topic of the week, it's actually not a UFC topic this week. It is a Bellator topic. Will Fight Master be successful? So people that don't watch Bellator or don't subscribe to Spike TV, Fight Master is Bellator's new reality TV show, kind of like The Ultimate Fighter. We have this new show. It has the coaching of Randy Couture, Frank Shamrock, Greg Jackson of Jackson's MMA, and former Bellator champion Joe Warren. There's four coaches of this season of Fight Master, the premier season. I think they got the great coaches involved. You know, that you got four named coaches. You have a very interesting concept of how the teams are picked. It's not your average, okay, you pick this guy and then you go back and forth of how you get your team. In this season, it's going to be welterweights. Season winner gets $100K, a future spot in a Bellator welterweight tournament, which is all great and dandy. But when you win your fight, you get to pick your coach. So it's kind of like the NBC show The Voice, the music show where whatever coaches turn around, you know, the contestants get to pick the coach. So it's a very interesting concept like that. But at the end of the day, with the Ultimate Fighter ratings dipping, I don't see Fight Master being successful. That being said, I've been wrong plenty of times. Look at my record from last week, the UFC 161. I was awful with predictions last week. I think I had like 4 right out of 11 fights. So go back and check out episode 8 to see how many I actually got wrong there. But I don't see another fight show being successful with the Ultimate Fighter kind of declining. The UFC is still doing great and Bellator still does amazing in the ratings, but people just want to see fights. Nobody really cares about the drama that goes on in the house or a coach's challenge of who can play mini golf the best. Nobody really cares about that type of stuff. If they just showed the Ultimate Fighter and they did 3 fights a week and that ended the whole season that way, and you did the whole season, you tape it 6 months prior, and everybody has the fights, and you go on TV for like 5 weeks, that would be so much better than the drama that carries on in the household. Because after the show's over, most of these guys become friends, so it doesn't make sense that they hate each other in the house, and now they're hanging out at like the Hard Rock Cafe in Vegas 2 weeks after the Ultimate Fighter finishes taping. So it's just unnecessary drama. I will say that I wish Bellator all the best with Fight Master, but I don't see it being successful. So that was Trevor's Corner this week. And ending the show this week, we have outside the UFC, because there is nothing to run down this week. There is no UFC this coming weekend. So I'm going to change the category up to outside the UFC. It's sponsored by Show No Love Clothing. Check out the awesome clothing line from Paul Bernier at www.shownolove.ca. So last night, this is why I postponed the show till today, was we had Bellator 96. It was from the WinStar World Casino in Thackerville, Oklahoma. It was main evented by King Mo versus Seth Petrozelli. Seth Petrozelli is the guy that finished Kimbo Slice before and actually really closed the promotion down when he beat Kimbo Slice in Elite XC, versus King Mo, who was coming off a loss in last year's tournament for Bellator. So it was kind of a win-win situation for both men. They both needed to win. And King Mo gets it from a completely dirty knockout. Watch it. I was engulfed in watching this fight. You have Seth Petrozelli trying to leg kick King Mo, trying to take the legs out from underneath him, and King Mo catches one and puts Petrozelli on his back. So you have this like little bit of a scramble on the mat. King Mo realizes, okay, enough's enough, and starts to get up. Seth Petrozelli pushes him a little bit, but not nearly hard enough, and King Mo comes down with a bomb and finishes Seth Petrozelli. So it wasn't a very long fight. It was 135 of round 1, and King Mo moving on in the tournament and rebounding from that loss, so kudos to him. In the co-main event, another shocker. I guess this was the week of co-main events to go awry almost, and the underdog beating the favorite. We had Jacob Noe defeating Babalu in what Babalu said after the fight, it kind of looked like he was retiring. So, if he does retire, Babalu had a great career. He will sorely be missed. He is a legend of the sport. But at the end of the night, Jacob Noe takes home the victory, TKO, 3:32 of round 3. And then the other 2 fights on the main card, we had Minikov defeating Ron Sparks via TKO strikes. And we had War Machine, and yes, that is his real name. He actually had it legally changed to War Machine, defeated Blas Avina via TKO. So we had a lot of knockouts on the Bellator card, a lot of decisions on the UFC card, and that was your week in MMA. So that's all the time I have for today. Special thanks go out to my sponsors, Fear the Fighter Training Academy, Combo Sports, Street Soldier, M&A Sports Media, Show No Love, and of course MMAJam.ca. Join me next week for episode 10, and until next time, dream it, believe it, achieve it. I'm Trevor Airdrie signing off.